Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for your time tonight. My name is Denise Robledo. My pronouns are she and her. Feel free to add yours to your name if you'd like. I am the video and photo producer here at Grey House Productions. And this event is being put on by Grey House Productions and Harbor Media. So thank you for being here. Before we get started, I'd love to go over our community guidelines that we've created for this event. This is just so that we're creating a safe space for all the participants tonight. Some of us have been doing this work already, and some of us are just joining this conversation. So we want to make sure that everyone feels comfortable and at home here. So the first one is respect. Be respectful of each other and there are lived experiences that we may differ from yours. Number 2 is listen. Try not to interrupt when someone else is speaking and give them time to finish their thought before jumping into the conversation. We always say to listen to understand, not to respond. Third one is participate. It's okay not to have the perfect answer to something, but lean into discomfort and do your best to add to the conversation. Something that we've talked a lot about in planning this event is knowing that we're not all going to have the answers right away. This is work that's going to take quite some time, and we want to start the conversation. So we'd love for you guys to all jump in and participate where you're comfortable. Number 4, confidentiality. By entering this space, you agree that any conversations you have will not be tied back to any individuals outside of this workshop. You can share the message, but not the messenger. And last is please check your ego. We're all coming to this conversation to brainstorm solutions together. There may be something you disagree on, which is okay, but don't debate another person and just move forward. If there are any other community guidelines that people would want to share in the chat, just something that you feel could help create a safe space. We definitely heard you when you filled out your registration, but just know that this is open for everyone. Before I introduce our moderator tonight, I just want to let you know how this event came to be. Over the summer, our CEO, Hannah Soto, shared out a blog post about our planned actions to stand against racism and also in support of the Black community in light of everything that was happening after George Floyd. And our moderator, this individual, reached out to her and held her accountable, which is something that she had, opened the floor for and opened up this conversation about if one of our planned actions is to hire 30% BIPOC crew on our sets, half of those specifically being Black professionals. How do we make sure that it's not just an action out of tokenism? And so this sparked a conversation between Hannah and Gonzalo, and then I was brought into it in September. And so we've been having this talk and planning this event for several months now, wanting to be very intentional to include the industry and community, and also for it to be an event that directs action. And so we hope that people take something away this evening, and also that we're able to start the cultural shift in our industry. So without further ado, I'd love to introduce you to Gonzalo Guzman, who is our moderator tonight. He is a queer Latinx photographer and writer based here in Chicago. And through his work, he hopes to foster empathy and promote social change through storytelling. He's currently working on a project that is collecting experiences of Latinx creatives in the industry. So please look out for that later in 2021. And I will hand the floor over to you, Gonzalo.
Thank you, Denise. Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining us for today's conversation on creating opportunities for BIPOC creatives and crew in the photo industry. Following the events of last summer and the protests that followed, there have been increased conversations across our industry around what it means to create spaces that are both diverse and equitable for all people. Part of this discussion has been around gatekeeping. And so for the purpose of our conversation today, we have defined gatekeeping as the idea that certain individuals may have limited access to opportunities in the industry due to the implicit bias surrounding race. This can manifest in a variety of ways that include being overlooked for entry-level positions on set, difficulty advancing in their careers similar to their peers, or having access to fewer resources or the network needed to be successful in this industry. This doesn't include the many unchecked microaggressions that can happen to BIPOC crew on set that create an unsafe working environment, though that's a conversation for a different time. There have been many great initiatives that have come out of the last 6 months, and we'll be talking to a few leaders of some of those programs shortly. But one thing that I feel has been missing from these conversations is the importance of individual responsibility. All of you have chosen to be here today because you want to be part of changing our industry. And I hope that you leave feeling empowered to use whatever resources and knowledge that you have at your disposal to help us create an industry that is more representative of the world that we live in. Before I introduce our panelists, I just wanted to go over like a few housekeeping things. So the panel portion of today is going to be recorded just so that we can share that with the community, especially if they weren't able to make it tonight. If you don't want to be on camera at any point, just turn your camera off for this panel portion and you won't show up in any video. The breakout sessions that we're going to be having after the panel will not be recorded though, so all of that will be completely confidential. If you have any questions throughout the event, feel free to just drop those into the chat box and Hannah or Denise will answer them. And we're also not going to have a formal Q&A with our panel, but you can also feel free to drop any questions into the chat box. And if we're able to integrate those into the conversation, we'll try and do that too. So with that, I'm going to introduce our first panelist. Our first panelist is Martine Severin, and she is a Chicago and LA-based lifestyle, advertising, and editorial photographer whose vibrant work aims to push boundaries and celebrate inclusivity. She's lived all over the world, including France, Belgium, England, and Boston, but her roots are tied to her home country of Haiti. Interested in creating fashion narratives that reference non-Western norms, she strives to collaborate with the brands who speak to a diverse audience. Martine is also the host of the podcast, This Is How We Create, a show that digs deeper into the creative life of contemporary artists of color. So thank you for being with us today, Martine. Our next panelist is Kate Davis. She is a senior agent and VP of operations at Apostrophe Reps, an artist agency representing commercial photographers, directors, and stylists across the country. Her previous years in public relations, photo production, and studio management led to joining the agency in 2013. Kate is a founding member and mentor for the Apostrophe Mentorship Program, also known as AMP, which was created in 2020 to amplify the voices of emerging BIPOC photographers. The program teaches mentees the business of photography with the goal of increasing equity and inclusion within our industry.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me.
And our final panelist is Quadri Holmes. He's the founder and executive producer of Curiosity Productions, a minority-owned creative diversity boutique specializing in video production, post-production, and photography. He successfully rose from intern to production assistant to producer, and finally to the founder and executive producer of Curiosity. While line producing, he recognized a significant shift in the market. Clients and agencies were seeking integrative creative talent options to represent the different social channels now available. Conversely, they did not want to sacrifice the quality or the production value because budgets were shrinking.
Hello, everybody. Thanks for having me.
All right, so with that, we're gonna jump into our questions. And we want this to be like super organic, so feel free to kind of jump in, whoever feels comfortable kind of going first. But we kind of introduced each of you as people, but could all of you tell me a little bit about some of the programs and initiatives that you are a part of in regards to promoting diversity and inclusion in the industry?
Well, I'm happy to go.
Oh, you go ahead. You go first.
Well, I sit on the board for an organization called Free Spirit Media, which literally is focused on making sure that minorities are in media. So similar to organizations that get kids off the streets, right, and have them playing basketball, we're trying to open up doors and pathways into actual, the workforce. Also sitting on the national board now for AICP, This is something, diversity, we are taking very seriously. We've been hosting roundtable discussions with agency creatives and agency leadership, as well as currently actively putting together a set of guidelines for best practices, similar the same way we do for what do you pay a crew member. We feel that we are at the point that, unfortunately, we need to tell people this is what doing the right thing does look like.
Would you like to go, Martine?
Yes, of course. Hello, everyone. Well, for me, community is very important. And I grew up in the Caribbean, and it's in a country that's very community focused. And so when the death of, well, the murder of George Floyd and happened, I was shook. I was very disturbed, and thank goodness that I was part of the board, the Chicago chapter of American Photographic Artists, because we were able to really come together and we were to define what it is that we are as an organization. And then from there, the Chicago chapter, we chatted about what was our position, what would we do, and then I was invited to talk with the national chapter, with the national APA, and from there throw my hat in the ring to create a diversity committee. And with that committee, we've all become very close. I think in some ways, unfortunately, the diversity committee is one of the best things that happened to me this year, because with us as a group, we've really been able to think about what APA stands for and how we can improve the lives and create more opportunities for underrepresented groups, and in turn make sure that the photography industry in itself is more equitable and more fair. So I'm so pleased that I was able to be there, to be part of the group that really is putting words and action together towards making a meaningful difference in terms of the success of underrepresented people in the photo industry.
I'll go next. So I am a part of the Apostrophe Mentorship Program, short form AMP, and it focuses on teaching BIPOC photographers the business of photography. We as an agency came together last year to try and focus on how we could make a tangible and meaningful change, something that we could really, that was not performative, but was actionable. That was extremely important to us. So we created this 12-week program that touches on what we felt were the major building blocks of the business of photography. And we talk about everything from identifying your brand attributes and your visual brand, to promoting yourself, to bidding on projects, how to interpret a creative deck, how to have a successful creative call, how to make a treatment, how to read a PO, how to understand usage language and contract language, and to how to set up your business, whether you're an LLC or an S Corp, how to invoice, how to track your P&L, really how to become a business owner. And that was the syllabus that we created for this 12-week program that we just wrapped up at the end, our first group at the end of last year. But we also involve our greater community, our greater creative community as well. We've set up a panel with art producers to explore what their role is and understand their perspective within the industry, and as well as portfolio reviews with the mentees' goal clients and agencies to help put their work in front of gatekeepers and start to have this conversation and break down those gates for the BIPOC community.
Great. I think that one question that I see a lot, is people having trouble figuring out where to kind of really start doing this work. So I was curious to know, how did each of you, in the different programs and initiatives that you've put out, how did you identify what the needs were of the community in creating and forming those programs?
I can hop in. So I think it's an ongoing process to identify that need. It was clear to us that there's an incredible amount of talent in the BIPOC community. That was not something that, you know, needed to be solved. It was figuring out why the BIPOC community was not being considered or hired at an equal rate as their white counterparts, and what could we do in any way to break down that gate and to give them the tools needed to have a successful career. So we felt that sharing our knowledge and trying to level the playing field in any way that we could might help make that impact and change their experience.
I would add to that as well that, you know, this conversation is a very scary conversation, right? So whereas it may be uncomfortable to have the conversation for non-minorities, right? Looking how can they be better allies in this fight? This was also a very scary conversation for those of us that were minorities, because these were our water cooler conversations or private conversations that would happen on the side, where we know that there's a disservice being done to us culturally. Unfortunately, there were no mechanisms in place at the time until everything that has happened last year that allowed us to speak honestly and genuinely back in business, period. So I don't think that the conversations we're having now are specific to just the advertising industry. When I speak with friends who are in banking, you know, they've gone through it. So I think all of this conversation is very systematic and ingrained in American culture, to be very honest. And the most amazing part is that in my conversations with other minorities about this, they have asked me, well, what is different this time? Like, we've gone through this. But what I see differently about this time and what has happened last year is people taking it serious because they're forced to take it serious. And now if they don't take it serious, you're going to be sitting on the wrong side of history. So whereas in a lot of ways we may have gone backwards in some things in our political climate, I think when it comes to race relations, we jumped like 15 years in a year, and it has been the most amazing thing to see. And now I think those of us, right, who are now a part of this conversation have a responsibility to push it even further. You've opened the door. There's a lot of us out there that are just going to push this cart on down the street. So I'm very excited about that part of it.
Thanks, Q. For me, as the chair of the diversity committee at APA, we took a different approach. When we came together as a group, the first thing we wanted to talk about was who we were as a group, and we needed to agree on a message. And so we took to drafting and drafted what our values were as a group. And then from there, in terms of before coming up with anything to any programs, we felt that it was really important to create a survey to understand the needs of our members. And with the survey, we just really wanted to understand not only the demographic makeup of our members, but also what were some of the needs of that group. We wanted to measure level of interest and in terms of various programming topics that they would want to have us create. We wanted to have feedback for different channels for our members and non-members to be able to get in touch with us as an organization. And then we always wanted to find a way to identify individuals who already belong to APA, who are already members, but whose voices weren't being heard. It was primarily through, that was really our first step, to identify what our community needed to create programs. In the case, so that's what I did with APA, with the diversity committee. As a board member on the Chicago chapter of APA, it was really fun to get to talk about what were we going to do, what steps would we do as APA Chicago. And it was really great to bring a few people to the table, and we invited Q, who came to us and shared some of the things that they wanted to see, because it's one thing to realize a problem. Well, the problems already existed, the problem of racism. It was one thing to know that the problem exists, but it was another thing altogether to think that we knew, as an organization, knew what the answers should be. And we felt it was really important to hear from our members and hear what's important to them, to see what the next steps would be in terms of an action that we could take as an organization to make sure that our members were getting more jobs, that they were getting seen, and that we could advocate for them.
I would like to know, like, from that APA survey, if there are like any findings that you found particularly interesting that you'd be able to share with us.
Oh, of course. So we released the survey in November, and it was open for a long time. And we had over 500 people who responded to the survey. So it was really interesting and really fun to create and to go through with a fine-tooth comb everyone's responses. And one of the things that was really surprising is the sense of community. You know, I opened and I said how having a sense of community is really important to me. And I think more than ever, especially during the pandemic, you know, we're all really isolated. And I think that when our members were asked to think about why the APA is important to them, what value do we bring to the table as an organization, one of the things that came up over and over again was having a really good sense of community and networking, and really relying on APA to be a really great source of education in terms of the programs that we provided to help our members become more better business people, as well as help them kind of like be more creative. Now, the other thing that was really interesting to me is that once we had all of the answers, we invited some of the folks who gave like long answers, and we wanted to chat with them. It's one thing to read someone's words, but it's another thing to invite them to like, well, it was supposed to be a 1-hour meeting that ended up being a lot longer, to talk to us about like, well, what are some of the things that you've seen through going through our programs over years? Because these are people who've been members for a number of years. And certainly one of the things that they said is, yes, community is great networking. I get to be a better professional, but when I go to your meetings, oftentimes I don't feel very welcome because of the makeup of the boards and because of the folks who would be attending some of the professional programs that we would have. And the thing is, and I have to say that I agreed with them, because as a woman of color, I would go to some of the meetings, even in Chicago, and yeah, I would be often the one black person in the room. And it was interesting to hear what our LGBT people who are the folks who are members who identify as LGBTQIA+, they mentioned some of the same thing. And a lot of people who identify as women as well, they would say some of the same things. So it's something that we really have to work on. And we have a really good game plan, and I'm so excited about what we have planned. I can't share everything with you, but for now, those are the highlights of what we've come up with.
You know, I'm definitely keeping an eye on APA, very excited for what is going to come out of that program, because it is, especially the Chicago chapter, because that is the one that is local to me. One thing that you had kind of touched on was just like the importance of finding like that community, and I think that continued support. So there's a lot of programs that are coming out right now that are focused on getting people that entry level kind of position, like getting that start in the industry. But what additional support do you feel like is needed to make sure that like the creatives that we're putting into these programs are able to still grow and advance in their careers.
Is that for me?
That's for everyone.
I'll let other folks go since I just chatted.
Well, I would say one of the biggest things that I have found is understanding that there are cultural differences, right? So when I'm working with some of the kids that I work with like Free Spirit Media, right? Serving children in an underserved community, west side of Chicago, south side of Chicago, when they are coming into the city, right, to go to, the mill or Curiosity, and like something as simple as we've got M&Ms and pop and, just all the things, and everyone can go up and get a bag of chips. Like, you have to remember that not everyone's situation is that situation. And, I often say when people are like, well, how do we integrate, with trying to make sure that minorities feel comfortable in our space? Well, first, it's understanding that you're not bringing them on to give a hand out. You are actually bringing them on to make what has been wrong right. Okay. So then you are putting your money behind trying to fix something that has been systematic. And along with that, you're going to provide some level of mentorship for these young people so that they stay motivated. When you are coming from a situation that perhaps is systematic poverty, in your mindset, sometimes there can be a self-sabotaging thing that happens, but they didn't create that to themselves. The system has created that for them. And so it does take organizations making a commitment to having, Black and brown people in positions of leadership, and not just in leadership because they are Black or brown, but good people who are Black or brown in leadership that are willing to mentor and be there. Because I can't tell you whether they are clients, whether they are personal friends in the industry. I get calls and we all share our stories. And, it is fascinating to me that, and I can speak for being Black, that being Black in America is universal. And the same thing that I experience in a position of power or not in a position of power, depending on who's looking at the situation, is the same thing that executives at agencies are experiencing as well, or figuring out how to navigate creative conversations about we need more minority creatives in our department. There's a reason minorities are not flocking to, the advertising industry going, hey, take me, take me, take me, because it's kind of been a market that has really ignored us. And it really was not designed for Black people, right? For a long time, it was advertised to white people and the Blacks will buy, right? And we are now saying that that is not how we want to be spoken to. That is not how we want to be marketed to. And therefore, the landscape of these agencies will need to change moving forward.
All right, I'm on mute. No, I just saw a comment that somebody shared that they said it feels like, let me find it. Listening to this is already like going to the therapist and thank you. I think it's so valuable to like have these spaces. I think for everybody, for BIPOC people in particular though, because kind of just like sharing that shared experience, I know for me, it makes me feel a lot less alone, while also just creating awareness of a lot what that different experiences. I did want to ask, kind of going off of that initial question of the additional support that's needed with AMP. It's going into its second session now. And I was curious if there was anything that you learned from the first session that kind of informed how you built the curriculum for the second group.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when we put the program together, there are so many different directions that we could have taken it. Everyone at our agency had so many different ideas. And the most important thing for us was just to get started and to learn as we went. So I would say even the first group, we had a plan at the beginning and it evolved throughout the program. And we came up with ideas throughout that we then implemented at the end. So I think it's just important to let it grow, and just try things. We, set out thinking we could talk, we maybe had 10 weeks worth of knowledge, and different topics that we could cover, and it quickly grew to 12. And then after we, we met with the mentees and we talked about their needs and their roadblocks and the support that they were looking for. We decided to put together Amplify magazine, which hadn't been a goal of ours at the beginning. And then it became clear that this was something else that we could do, put together this magazine and share their work with the entire community and continue to, have eyes on their talent and get them hired. So we definitely let it evolve, which I think is important. And we're, setting up our second group now, which is really exciting. So, and I anticipate that as we meet those mentees, we are going to continue to personalize the experience for them and probably come up with some other ideas along the way too.
Yeah, it's been great to see how that program has kind of like grown and changed. It's still very new, but like being able to continue to like promote like those creatives, so that way that it's not just like we're giving you all this information and then we're kind of like leaving you to kind of like fend for yourself.
Absolutely. And that was another thing that came up. We're like, you form these relationships and you are supporting these creatives, and we can't just have that be the end, like for both sides. So now we have the Amplified magazine, but we also have monthly check-ins with whoever can join, and we set tangible goals together. We hold each other accountable. It's something as simple as I'm going to shoot one project and reach out to 4 clients by the time we talk again, just really making sure that everyone stays engaged, and that they are using the tools and knowledge that we've discussed. And, it's hard, especially when you're starting out in your career, to not get discouraged, and especially when you're BIPOC, to not get discouraged, and just coming together and keeping that sense of community, both with their mentors, but also with each other. We're so happy that within, some were based in New York, some were based in LA, some have since moved, but they've created a community together too, and held each other accountable and collaborated on projects and are, referring each other for things. So my hope, is as we continue to add classes, groups to this program, is that community just continues to grow, and the magazine has issue after issue, and it is something that is looked towards within our industry as a resource for talented photographers.
Yeah, that community aspect is really like so invaluable, particularly as a BIPOC like creative that's like in this industry, to not only be able to have like those shared experiences, but to feel that support. Martine, is there like anything that somebody touched on as far as like that additional support to foster these BIPOC creatives in their career?
Oh, totally. So for us, additional support is, we were, when you touched about the survey, what were some of the results? One of the things that we noticed as part of the result is that people wanted to get in front of decision makers, in front of people who are going to actually hire them. Portfolio reviews are great, but you could go to portfolio review after portfolio review. If you're not getting hired, if there's not an action that's coming out of that, that's often a very difficult, it's not as meaningful as it could potentially be to some of our BIPOC members, and making sure that we are providing support as much as possible. We are creating a lot of different chapters have by lists that we have created, so that say say someone is looking for the name of a photographer who specializes in X or Y, that there is a list that they can go to of very talented BIPOC members or LGBTQI A plus members or members who are of our Asian community, or even photographers who have disability. You know, there's a big list that they could go to that they'd be able to source and find that talent. You know, but we've also been thinking about doing some other things too, because I think, you know, this is such a huge issue in terms of diversity and what does that mean, and how can we not only educate ourselves, but also educate our community at large, as well as educate some of the folks who are the decision makers. And so one of the things that we started was APA Scope. I moderated the first panel where we talked about, you know, what are some of the things that Black photographers are dealing with in the industry, and, you know, how do you advocate for yourself? So it's the first Monday of every month, and last Monday we had a few of our board members who are part of the LGBTQ community. They came in and they were chatting. That was just a really wonderful conversation that they had about their experience in the community. And then next month, I should say, we have two of our members who identify as Asian who are also hosting the APA Scope for March to talk about their experience as well. And I think that's one step that we can do in terms of making sure that all are aware of the issues that are these groups face, but yet also creating a spotlight and a stage for them to come forward and share their experiences, and hoping as they're sharing their experiences, more people will see them, and then there will be more eyes, obviously, on them.
Mhm. I think it's really great that I like what APA is doing with kind of having like these very like specific conversations, because there can be overlap in those experiences, but sometimes it can be really hard to kind of find like your community, like within the photo community. I am curious, with all of the work that each of you are doing, have you gotten any feedback either on like the scope conversations that have been going on, or just from people reaching out about AMP or anything that AICP is doing right now?
Yeah, we definitely on the AICPs, and ironically, get calls where people are like, "You're the AICP, you can just do this, right? You can just tell people this is what they have to do." And it doesn't quite work that way, you know? So, you know, to be very honest, it is a process, right? It is a process to dismantle the system and the way things have been. And we are finding ourselves, as we continue to have the discussions, like what is legal, what is not legal, what information can we ask in surveys, what information can we not ask in surveys. We can never really mandate things, because then you are forcing the hand, which is a felony, right? But you can make recommendations and guidelines to help agencies navigate and clients navigate what best practices would be. And I will say that's been one of the trickiest parts, is that it is layered and this is complicated. You know, it's not just penetrating maybe an art buyer or a producer, it's also getting to leadership, it's also getting to the brands directly. So there are so many layers to it. And I think, you know, ultimately we will get there in the end. But I would say patience. For those that are sitting out there going, why isn't this happening faster? The same reason this has been going on for hundreds of years. You know what I mean? It's not going to be able to just change overnight. But I think if enough of us keep chirping, keep having the conversation with all of the different initiatives, it will end up working well. And I will say there's an offshoot of us that get together as well from various organizations, from 600 and Rising, Free the Work, Bid Black, obviously APA, AICP, like, and we get together and we discuss, so that we're not doubling up on efforts that one is making an inroad on, so that we can keep each other a little bit informed too on, this is something that we've accomplished and it feels like this is going in the right direction. So for once, we're actually talking a little bit to make sure that we can all stay on the same page and attempting to support each other's efforts, in this fight, to be honest. And, it's that old saying that we are stronger together. There are different initials, there are different labels, but I think if everyone's agenda is wrapped around, kind of the same idea and same concept, and you're talking to various groups of different people, I think ultimately we will all get there together, but it's a process.
For me, what I've seen is the feedback, the most important feedback that we've been getting, and the most common, is about building that pipeline to make sure that we are getting BIPOCs from all levels, right? We're bringing them in and mentoring them from, say, elementary school to high school, all the way through when they would be getting work and working at an ad agency, or if they're getting work as a photographer or as a studio manager, right? So making sure that we are building that pipeline so people know what's available to them, and also making sure that they get hired, gatekeeping, right? That they get hired, and when they do get hired, that they are supported and that they're given opportunities to rise and opportunities to win, rather than being held back and saying, well, they're just not like me, right? So I'm just making sure that we continue to see not only BIPOCs, but people who identify as LGBTQ, people who Asians, people who are of all different backgrounds, right? So and I think that's the thing of leading a diversity committee, you realize that when all of us, when there is a large group of people who are being held down, that it really, in general, creativity gets stifled, right? And so we're just trying to make sure that we create some kind of a ramp to make sure that these folks that we've decided to really take action and really support, that we're not just saying the words, but we're actually finding ways to actually get to lift off.
I would like to move to our last question before we move to our breakout sessions. So I feel like a lot of these panels and conversations, everybody's always like, this is great. Like, what do I do now? What advice would you give to someone that's looking to make this a part of their business practice? And then if you have any closing thoughts,
I'll go first. I think that we just have to be ready to be uncomfortable. As Q said, racism isn't fun. It's not fun for Black folks either. It's not fun for anyone. But if we are committed to see change, you have to live in what is uncomfortable. That is the work, right? And so the part of the work also includes, in terms of being an ally, I should say, of doing the work and educating yourself, and not making sure that it's your Black friends are the ones who are educating you, or that you're relying on someone else. You have to do the work in terms of reading. And I believe you have some really great resources for the folks who have attended this meeting right here. There are really great resources. I would say, that attend our APA scopes. They're really good. They're on YouTube if you've missed the past ones, because we tackle some issues that are really uncomfortable. But I think they're issues that we have to talk about. And just get to know some of the folks of color who are around you. Make it more of an effort to follow them, to learn more from them, and do the hard work of actually going on the mini lists that are available. That's in the resources that you're providing as part of this group, of coming to this meeting, and doing your due diligence to find the folks that are that would be a really good fit for you and would enrich your lives.
I was going to add, understand our own cultural biases, right? So before we can get into anything with someone given a job, getting a job, mentoring, loving minorities, not loving minorities, just understand we come into this culturally biased, right? All of us, based on what your lived experiences are and based on what you are taught. So the next time you hear someone say something that is inappropriate, let them know it's inappropriate. You know what I mean? So that's, to me, step one is, right, acknowledging we are biased, acknowledging we've all heard things and given it a pass. Stop giving things a pass, call it out. And then once we put ourselves in that space, I think when those of you who are in positions to hire, whether that's crew, positions to hire businesses, do the work, right? And the work isn't just phoning it in and saying, this is who I know and this is why. Do the work and hold yourself accountable to say, am I really looking at this from a diversity perspective for my own personal benchmark, right? You know, me too, Q, you know, Black business owner, I had to say to myself at a certain point, what Black businesses are we engaging? Are we really engaging Black crew members? Where am I pulling people from? I can't sit on this diversity panel or any other diversity panel and not walk in those footsteps to make sure that I'm pushing for change, you know, just in general throughout the industry. So the work is, yes, there's a lot of lists out there, which I know can be very confusing, but if that is the resources that we have now, utilize them. And if you don't know where to find the information, we have information to the APA, we have information to the AICP, you know, these organizations that are supporting kind of the creative industry, reach out and say, what do you guys have? Because many of us have had these lists forever. Unfortunately, they've been ignored. But make yourself accountable and see who you can find new. And you'd be surprised how new creative will be sparked because you took that extra step to do something different rather than doing the norm. And I think overall, you'll do the industry more of a service by just taking that extra step.
I absolutely agree with both of you and everything you've said. I think that it does feel different right now, and it's encouraging. I think that it's important, you know, allyship to me means listening. It means being anti-racist every day, and it means never stopping. It's once you start the conversation and listen, you realize how many opportunities you have in your everyday life, whether it's your personal life or your work life, to make a change, to learn, to be more open and understand the changes that can happen. You know, every client presentation that we make as an agency now, we talk about our mentorship program and we talk to our clients about what initiatives they're starting. And it's a comfortable conversation because we get asked often, you know, what should we do? How can we do something? What's something actionable? How do you set up your program? What could we do? What could my company do? What could I do? So I think that there are a lot of people out there wanting to make this change and wanting to start. And so just helping each other and continuing the conversation is so important. We can hold each other accountable. We can help each other, and together we can continue the shift within our industry. I truly believe it.
All right, thank you so much. You know, it really is a lot about having those uncomfortable conversations, as well as that individual responsibility aspect that we've been talking about. I want to thank all of our panelists for their time today. We're going to move into our breakout sessions, but if you want to follow up on any of the initiatives or programs that our panelists are doing, all of that information is going to be in the deck that we're going to send out after this event. Yeah, so our breakout rooms, we're going to put everybody into groups of like 3 to 5 people, and you're going to have some guided questions that are going to help you try to figure out what your next steps could be to push this work forward. These should have been sent out to you in in the deck, but we're gonna go over the questions really quick again. Oh, Hannah just put that into the into the chat. So if you want to open up that link, we're also going to have a Google form. So that way we can get a record of the responses that each group does. So when you get put into your groups, make sure that you're just going to choose one person to put the responses anonymously into this guide. And then we want to share some of the ideas that people come up with all of you that are here today, but with the community at large as well. For the breakout sessions, make sure that your camera is on and that you have your mic on so that you can have these conversations. And just a reminder, that part will not be recorded. To go over the questions really quick. So we want everybody to think about your own